So there's a big misconception in the rugby league world that there's a difference between conditioning and skills. Oh, sorry, that's not the misconception. The misconception is you don't do conditioning when you're doing skills. So let me talk through this. If your preseason session is something like warm up, skill drill, skill drill, fitness drill, then game in 10 to 15-minute blocks, then that I would say is the happy medium to where I like to coach from, because I do pre-seasons where everybody has the ball all the time. I'm working with some coaches at the moment, getting them to deliver some stuff, and quite frankly, 10 minutes of the session are without the ball because I've got so many players. So I've had to factor that in. The more ball you have in your preseason training, the more games that you're playing, the more drills that you're doing with the ball that have fitness elements to them, your training numbers will go up and up and up. If the ball isn't involved, you need to get yourself out of the 1980s, the 90s, and put stuff in your training that can apply to the game that our players play and teach them something while they're getting fit. Because most of you only have a few hours with your team, 2 hours if you're lucky. So why waste so much of it running your players in straight lines? You're not preparing them for the Olympics. And this is the problem that goes right through the game. I've heard professional players say things like pre-season is absolutely brutal. I mean, we've just had Michael Maguire coach against Craig Bellamy in the NRL Grand Final, and both their pre-seasons are brutal. But the problem is the difference is they're in full-time rugby league environments, right? So they can afford to do 30, 40, 1 hour minute, 60-minute blocks where the ball isn't involved, because the ball will be involved later because they've got all day to train and they've got to fill the time up. Now, have a think about how you want your training to be engaging for your players. And I guess let's take a step back. Let's have a look at how we get to this point. When we leave playing rugby league, two of the most common pathways available to us are as a coach, and we tend to get pigeonholed as a technical or tactical coach, or at higher levels, we might be a strength and conditioning coach, what we call an S&C coach. So anything beyond, anything that's junior rep or any club that takes their football seriously do have an S&C coach. And what tends to happen is those characters get pigeonholed. S&C coaches tend to get categorized as not being football people. And as a result, they have to sort of stay in their lane a little bit. Right? You're now with the conditioner. Whereas coaches, they're the football brains. And they get pigeonholed as that too. Because you're the football coach, apparently you know nothing about fitness or gym. When I started coaching over 25 years ago, very early in that journey, I knew that I wanted to be a coach, but I also knew that to be a good coach, I needed to know if the S&C coaches that I ever worked with were good and they weren't full of crap. So I promised I would always learn enough and dedicate enough time in my life to always have my finger on the pulse and be able to ask the right questions of any S&C coaches I work with. I remember John Doe, who's now been a rep coach with the Ipswich Jets. He was the Queensland Cup S&C coach for a while there. He's doing so many other strength things now. And I remember when I first met him, when he came to Ipswich State High School, and he'd just come out of uni and he hit me with all this technical jargon. And he remembers the conversation, and I remember the conversation. And he'd literally come fresh out of university and he'd learned all these theories. And I basically went back at him and said, now we've got to apply them to the real world, mate. And also, he will accept that was the big learning curve, I suppose, for him. And he was brilliant. He adapted really well. I guess I was lucky. I worked with a real top conditioner at a young age. First of all, he was one of my coaches, a guy called Craig Twist. And then he went on to be Professor Craig Twist, and a very highly sought after man in his field in the UK and Europe. And I ended up being on coaching staff with him eventually. And put it this way, I've been using GPS units, heart rate monitors, and the like for over 20 years. So 22, 23 years. And I remember Twisty strapping up our players to get their heart rate traces as far back as 2002. And I started to study the impact of the game on the players then, and also getting our training to match that or be below that or above that. So basically, as I've developed as a coach over the years, always checked in with Twisty, I've developed a philosophy that the whole rugby league session is conditioning. So the minute you start and the heart rate goes above resting, you're starting the conditioning process. The whole session is conditioning, whether you're doing skills or whether you're doing, in inverted commas, fitness. But as soon as the players start warming up, their heart rates will start increasing and the process of conditioning begins, in my opinion. And I work with coaches all the time doing this on the coach mentor program that I run. So if they do pre-season models with me, and if we plan their pre-season, we get to a stage where we put all the technical stuff into a plan, and then we put the fitness on top of that and decide whether that session is going to be below match intensity, or above match intensity, or different parts of the session might be below match intensity, or above match intensity. How do I know what those three things are? I've been measuring it for 20 odd years. Okay. Whereas so much of the game, and I've seen this week, is still used to seeing a fitness drill happen over there, and then a bit later a skill drill happening. And what happens then is the skills don't get done as well because the players are fatigued from the drill, or the team that did the skill drill first do them better than the team who do them second because you've separated them. And that is the most common thing I see in the game, instead of small-sided games for skill development and conditioning. So, for example, if you did a small-sided game, 6v6, 7v7, 8v8 on a modified field, according to the laws of the game, so a 13-side field is 68 meters. So if you half that to, 6 or 7, so you half the field width, so 34 meters wide, you are mimicking the game. And if you've got a small-sided game in that parameter, you are, and you take them back 10 meters, and maybe if you put in collision in the game or players getting up and down every play the ball or something like that, you are starting to mimic what happens in the game, not from just a skill point of view and a game recognition point of view, but also heart rate. When the heart goes up, when the heart rate goes down, when you sprint, when you jog, when you walk, blood lactate responses, everything that happens in the system when you are playing a game of rugby league as opposed to running 100 meters on a field. You can condition players doing 13 versus 13 scrimmage. And at the same time as getting fit, you can learn how you and teach your players how you want to play strategically. So I'll give you a perfect one. Do 13 versus 13. If you want to focus on completion and holding the ball, tell the defenders when you're defending, you have to get up and down off the ground every play of the ball, like a burpee. And then you watch your players do everything they can to hold the football. That's just it, right? And they will also talk to each other to make sure that happens. So, like I said, I've used GPS units and heart rate monitors for much of my career, and I've also seen it live on iPads too at times. And by the time I got into the second half of what is, second half of what is my current coaching career, I started using this data, Australians, data, to make decisions about what happened in the following sessions. And I've in the past had offices where I've had charts on my wall tracking what work the players have done over a few years. Anybody who walked in would think it's the ravings of a madman. But mapped everything the players are doing. And then after a few years of tracking this, I was able to predict when we might get soft tissue injuries almost to the session. So I used to pull back that week and we avoided them. Now, did we avoid them out of luck or did we avoid them because we planned? Who cares? We avoided them. And like I said, this is something I help coaches with all the time. And I accept most of you listening will have never been exposed to a lot of this that I'm talking about. And I know this intuitively now. So what I'm saying to you is accept what I say if you can. And I do accept as well that doing games in training, first of all, they're variable. So you can't control them. If you send players on a run, 20 meters, 40 meters, 60 meters, you can easily see what the players are doing. You can measure that. If they're playing in a game, it's harder for you to control what they do. And it's harder for you to measure. And players will be running in all sorts of directions. And sometimes you'll get caught up in the rules of the game and you'll have no idea how far your players are traveling. That said, you've really got to get away from this 4 to 6 weeks of not seeing a football and just being running to the ground instead. If you are listening to this, and I know so many coaches who still train like this, you are honestly stuck in the dark ages. And I really am here to help you get out of those. And then the other thing is, if you're doing fitness work with your squad and you have no real knowledge behind the choices that you're making, with that, you're taking a huge risk. So you're close to being negligent because it's not hard to get fitness information now. So you can go to rugbyleaguecoach.com.au and there's an S&C page there.